thanks so much for coming to the podcast. I'm so thrilled you're finally here to talk to.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So everybody knows that I love your Stonewall Investigation books. And we're going to get to talking about those in just a few minutes here. But you've got something new out right now called Loosen Up, which is part of the Aces Wild series. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, so Loosen Up, it follows Jordan and Brody, which were two of my characters from last year's Heart to Heart anthology. And so the way they kind of came about was we got reader suggestions for names and traits and all that kind of stuff. And Brody and Jordan came out of that. And I loved writing their story a year ago. They went off on an adventure in the savannah and ended up saving an elephant from being poached. And it was like super, super cute and super amazing. And I just had such a fun time writing them. So I figured now would be a great time to bring them back for Aces Wild. And so now we're picking up about 2 years after they first met. And Jordan's just been like super stressed at work. His 9 to 5 is just brutal. He hates it. And so Brody ends up making a surprise vacation to go to Miami to go, relax, rest, have some pina coladas. And then they end up getting on the plane. Jordan accidentally eats an entire edible brownie, which you should not do on a plane. And then they find out that the plane is actually headed towards Vintage Ridge, North Carolina, which is the complete opposite of Miami. And so then they kind of have to figure out, okay, well, do we go on this vacation? Do we kind of just cancel everything? They end up just going with the flow, which is kind of what I really wanted to get out of the main message. Just kind of sometimes life, throws random stuff at you and you just kind of have to go with it. And it ends up being even better than kind of how it was planned originally. So that's what they end up finding out. The vacation ends up being, exactly what they needed. They meet Ace and Wilder, which was such a blast to write because they were already kind of constructed characters. So it was cool kind of jumping into their heads and trying to fit them into this story. And it was a really fun experience. So they go meet Ace and Wilder. They pick up a few things at their shop and they get into a bunch of hijinks. I really wanted a romantic comedy kind of feel for it. So I think I just really channeled kind of Bridesmaids type of thing, full Bridesmaids, Kristen Wiig, in the back of my shoulder, just whispering the entire time. And even on the top of my Google Docs, I had in bold letters, think rom-com. And so that kind of kept me on track for their story. And that's how Loosen Up came to be.
What's it like developing characters the way you did for these two, and then not only the reader suggestions for that, but then to drop them into another universe as well?
Yeah, it was a little bit more challenging than I thought. I mean, thankfully, the last anthology was kind of a short story, so I did go back and read it and try to get into that headspace again because it was kind of a year-ish or so. So if it were a longer story, I think it'd be a little bit harder to fully kind of immerse myself in there. And since they clicked so well in the first story, there wasn't too much angst or anything, or and they just kind of flowed really well. It was kind of easy to pull them back in and kind of drop them in that world. And I think that kind of made it funnier because they were kind of these two lost Canadians that just had no idea where the hell they were going, and then they kind of just had to make it a good time. And so I think that kind of added to it too.
How did you get involved in Aces Wild?
I was thankfully invited. I got my little Hogwarts letter in my Outlook email, and I was like, yes, of course. And yeah, I mean, it was really good that I said yes because it's been such a good project. Not only have the authors just been great, the books, there's something for everyone. I mean, there's I think 13 of us, if I'm not mistaken. And literally, there's a different kind of palette for every single person. And on top of that, we all chose our own charities to donate to. So it's kind of spreading out the goodness. My Loosen Up is the first 90 days are going to the Los Angeles LGBT Center, which I'm super excited about because I used to walk by their building all the time. And I'm now I can finally give back to you guys. And so it's been a really good experience.
And you've been giving back another way, too, because you just did the AIDS walk as well.
Yes, yeah, I did. That was the first time we ever did it. We got a big group of friends together and we walked downtown. Thankfully, the weather was perfect. It was really energizing. There were so many people on the streets. We raised a good amount of money, and it was really, really exciting. So yeah, this is kind of the season for it, I guess. I mean, it should always be the season for charity, but yeah,
It's great to see your readers giving back both through supporting you on the walk and picking up Loosen Up
yeah,
as well.
yeah, absolutely. And even for the walk, like I wasn't sure what to kind of expect, so I set my fundraising goal at 300, and in like a few hours I had to bump that up because people were being so generous, and I was just so blown away because it's for such a really great cause, and I'm glad that I was able to be a part of it for sure.
Now, Stonewall Investigations and its spinoff of the Miami series. I mean, what was the origin of these super popular books?
The origin. I mean, I wish I had like a cool origin story. I wasn't like dropped in a vat of acid or anything. But let's see. I was finishing up my Sierra Review series, which followed a group of doctors in a hospital, and so I kind of knew I wanted to do like an office space kind of thing. I knew I wanted them linked through the office. And for, I mean, 8 books, I think before I did Stonewall, I had 8 books out. And they all had like a little mystery element to it. And so I thought, okay, well, I kind of want an office space kind of romance, and I also want to incorporate the mystery. A detective agency would be literally perfect. And so I came up with that kind of core idea first, and then I kind of tried brainstorming names and stuff. And thankfully, it didn't take me too long to land on Stonewall Investigations, which, I mean, once I like thought of it, I was like, okay, this is like, that's it, it's done. And then from there was Zane and Enzo, who kind of like kicked it all off, and they started the whole journey with Zane's hunt for the unicorn, and then Enzo just falling in love with him, and it just kind of carried on through that. Yeah, I don't have like a crazy origin story, but I'm very happy about it though. Yeah.
And then you decided to spin off to Miami. How'd you decide on the Miami location?
Well, I'm from Miami, kind of. I was born and raised in Jersey, and then I moved to Miami when I was 14. So I kind of got like half and half. And so every Christmas we fly back to Miami, and we always visit family and stuff. So I wanted to like visit that place in my books, and I kind of wanted to go to the Miami Beach and have that like kind of like Ocean Avenue kind of feel with the neon lights and the Art Deco, and I thought there was going to be a lot to play with too, because Miami is such a big city and there's so much going on. Like I knew it'd be a good place to set it at. I did kind of want to do like how NCIS kind of does, like NCIS LA, NCIS New York. So I kind of wanted to like follow that avenue, and I thought Miami would be it. So I went from New York to Miami, and then we'll see what's next, I guess.
And you can certainly tell the places. Like the way you wrote the New York books, I knew exactly where you were in those settings.
Yeah, I try. I definitely. I mean, it's a lot of Google Maps too, but I did visit New York a few times, and like while I'm there, I'm just trying to absorb everything, like taking pictures of random street signs just to have them on my phone. Like I'm sure some of that kind of like seeps in, and I try to be very kind of like I'm writing a movie almost. Like I want to make sure everyone is seeing what I'm seeing and just living in that scene. So I'm glad it worked out for New York for sure.
How do you come up with the thriller aspects of these? Because I mean, you created some pretty twisty turns with the unicorn. I mean, that was some pretty hardcore stuff there.
The unicorn, I knew I wanted a 4-book arc for it. So I knew who it was going to be, and I knew why they were doing what they were doing, but I didn't really have like the in-betweens. I didn't have all the red herrings. I didn't even have books 2, 3, or 4 plotted. I just had book 1 when I thought of the unicorn. So in that sense, I kind of just, I had, the big tent poles, and I kind of went along with it. So with that, it's kind of like sometimes it surprises me too while I'm writing. But with the smaller ones, because in each book I do also have another mystery running underneath it, those are a little bit more kind of planned out, and I kind of like have beginning, middle, and end for those. But not all the time. Sometimes I do jump around, and I'll have, I'll be in chapter 20 and I'll think, oh, maybe I can drop a clue now back in chapter 4 about this. So I can go and do that. Or sometimes I'll even I just don't really get married to like the plot outlines I do. So I think that also keeps things fresh. So if I think of a better twist than one that I had planned out before, I'm not scared to go ahead and change it. Like I'll just go ahead and make it, even twistier. Yeah.
I'm fascinated by the idea that you didn't have more of the unicorn series, I guess, or the plot of that planned out when you did book 1, because it all came together so well in book 4 to bring it down to those final, tense things that happened throughout that book.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I knew like some of the big clues that were gonna have to kind of flow through all 4 books. Like I knew those specific clues, but yeah, a lot of other things I kind of figured out along the way per book. I mean, once I got into book 2, then I figured out a little bit more, and then book 3, so and so.
Do you think we'll go back to New York for more, or is that story kind of done?
I don't know. I haven't even thought about that until now, so maybe. I think you just sparked. This is an origin story. This is it. This is a good origin story. I do want to visit other cities. I'm wrapping up Miami now, so it might be New York.
Well, if you go to other cities, I mean, you think about how NCIS and CSI and all those shows do it. They get 2 or 3 or 4 cities going on, and then you get the epic crossover.
Oh, that's true.
So,
okay, yeah, have a big superhero crossover. I'm liking how this is going.
Okay, well, there's the origin story for later.
Right.
Right here on the podcast.
At least it's on camera. We got proof. We got proof of it.
That's right. How much research goes into your thrillers? Like, what do you have to know? We were talking to an author at GRL who said, well, he has to learn how to burn bodies.
Oh.
To be able to put that into his book. Now, you haven't burned a body, at least not that I've read so far, but like, what goes into getting your thrillers to work well on the page?
I haven't Googled burning bodies yet, but I've Googled some weird stuff, like medication and like what'll knock someone out. That I remember thinking like, should I type this into my computer right now? But other than that, I don't. I researched a lot about how private detectives worked and what their kind of like daily lives are, and what their job responsibilities are kind of. But for the cases, I don't get too into the weeds with it. I don't try to I try to just get the essence and try to go from there. And also I don't try to get too gruesome or anything. So anything that would kind of require me to stretch and research a little bit more, I don't think I do. I watch a lot of Criminal Minds and a lot of I just finished Mindhunter, so that's probably it seeps in that way.
You mentioned, I mean, we've talked about 2 different genres here between your rom-com side and your thriller side, and you've got some contemporary romance in your backlist too. Do you enjoy any one particular genre more than the other, or?
I love them all. I can't. I really love this rom-com that I wrote. I don't know if I mean, I probably can pull off a full-size book of it. I don't know. I love them all. I do love the mystery element because it does add a little layer. And for me, it's fun. I love puzzles. I love trying to figure things out. And in a way, it's kind of the opposite. I'm just messing up this puzzle and, hoping someone else can figure it out. And so I find that really fun. And even in all those stories, the romance is still the star of the show. It wouldn't happen without the two main guys. So I think romantic mystery right now would be my top.
How do you work to balance the romance with the mystery side of it so that it all flows nicely?
It's a little complicated. I just try to I guess see it as a full picture, and if I feel okay, he's investigating for too long, where's the other guy? Why haven't we seen them together for a while? I'm very aware of that, so I'll try to push them together somehow. Or if maybe they're on a date and someone spots, someone that they want to investigate, and then the other one kind of comes and gets like dragged along. So then you get like both of them in the same scene together and kind of working off each other. So I try to play off of those kind of things and never keep them away for too long. And I just try to make sure that nothing's overwhelming the other, because it definitely can happen. I mean, especially like if the mystery is just like, if he has to interview like 3 different people and you want to get those interviews down on page, well, then maybe you don't have to do the 2 interviews on page. You can kind of like make him talk to the date about 2 of them, and then you can kind of like balance it out like that. So yeah, it's definitely a juggling act, but it's fun. I like it.
And is there a genre you want to pursue but haven't taken the plunge on yet?
Fantasy. That's what I like grew up on. Like I just devoured Harry Potter, like Anne McCaffrey, the Dragon Riders of Pern. I would read constantly. R.A. Salvatore, like all those like big fantasy books. Although not so much high fantasy, which I used to read a lot as a kid. More so now, I would love to do like a gay romantic fantasy, or just like a gay Harry Potter. Like I really want that. So I think that's definitely in the pipelines for sure. I just love dragons, and a gay dragon would be like really cool.
Does anything hold you back from necessarily starting that, or is it just a matter of where it fits in your overall scheduling?
Maybe I have started it. No, it
breaking news right here, perhaps.
Yeah, right. It's very schedule dependent. Like I want to make sure I get the Stonewall books out, and then whatever else I had planned. But I've been world building on the side, and like I have
that's cool.
bunch of notes and stuff. Yeah, so it's been cool. I have a big like resource list thing that I've been looking at, and so yeah, I've been working on it side by side, but I haven't been able to like fully dive in yet.
Yeah. Podcast listeners know that I admire people who take the dive on fantasy, because there's so much world building that you as the author need to know that you don't necessarily need to tell every bit of to your reader, and like where the balancing act is on that.
Yeah. You don't want to like info dump them in the first paragraph about like, because then people get bored and they want to read that. Yeah, it's hard, but it's also fun. And I love having like those little tidbits in the back of my head, like, oh, this is going to pop up later. Oh, maybe like you said, like the readers will maybe never know about this, but it's kind of cool that I do.
I look forward to seeing what a Max Walker fantasy looks like.
Me too.
So I want to make you do origin story again. What got you started writing?
I guess, well, like you probably, like I wrote since I was a kid, like back when I don't even remember. Like one of the first, I was thinking about this the other day. One of the first books I ever like wrote, I say that. It was just like a black journal with black pages, and then the pen, I'll never forget, like wrote rainbow. So I don't know why my parents didn't realize back then. But I remember being in my grandparents' house, and I was writing a story about a cow in space, and I like drew the cow, and I like had this entire like story about it. And that was like the first ever story that I remember writing. But then after that, obviously it grew into way more. Like when the internet came about, I still wasn't in high school yet, and I had found like role-playing boards, like forum role-playing playbook post or whatever, and they were like fantasy boards. So one of them, I think it's still around, it's called Illyria. You make your character, you have like you're in charge of the inventory of all that kind of stuff, and then you just kind of jump in on people's stories and you reply and they reply. And I was like 12, 13. Like I looked back at the post and it was like there's no like space after the periods. Like I had no idea what I was doing, and I was just still like, oh my god, I'm so happy. And I would like go to school and I'd be so excited just to get home to see what like people would write. And so that kind of like kicked it off, and I was just super excited to write all the time. And then another thing that came with the posts was that I would have to like spend so much time on Photoshop, because we would make like little layouts for our posts, and I wanted them to be like cute and bright and poppy and stuff. And so I think that kind of like helps now too, because I make my own covers. So that's kind of, it all kind of went hand in hand from just that long section of my life where I was just like constantly in this world. And then once high school came around and then college, it kind of got a little bit less and less because I was writing for school and reading for school. I was supposed to be a doctor. I was supposed to go to medical school, and I was told my mom since I was like little, I was gonna move to LA just for like a year. I'm gonna do it. I graduated college. The time came, and she obviously didn't believe me until I graduated. And she's like, "Wait, you're actually moving?" I was like, "Yes." And so I postponed medical school to move to LA to try out to be an actor, because that was always my dream. For some reason, I never even though I was reading constantly and I was always writing, I never thought like, oh, I could write a book, because I never had. I always just wrote like little stories. And so it never like clicked for me until like 3 or 4 years being here in LA. No medical school, thank God. And I was working a day job, and the day job was really great. Like they let me go out on auditions, but it wasn't that many auditions. Like I'd have to go, once a week, drive, 30, 40 minutes into town and drive back to try and make it in my 1 hour lunch break or whatever. So I was trying to figure out ways of getting out of this day job. And then I found self-publishing, and the entire world opened up to me, basically. Like I would just spend all day at work, like reading these posts, like trying to like figure out like, wait, people are like actually doing this? Like this is incredible. So then that's when I started writing. And even at my desk job, I would just write between phone calls. I'd like pick up the phone, hang up, write. And then back then it was very short story oriented. So I was still writing like the short form, but I did notice more and more traction. And then I was able to give my 2 weeks notice. And then it was weird because the last audition I ever had was on my last week of work. And then after that, I never got sent out, which is totally fine with me, because I was way more happier than I ever could be, like just doing what I wanted to do. So it really worked out really, really well. And I'm like super lucky.
Did the almost medical school lead you to do the medical series of books?
Yeah, it was definitely an influence. Because a lot of my friends, they're, doctors now, after 8 years. They're just finishing now. And so in college, like I was part of a pre-medical group or whatever. And so it was very much write what you know, kind of. I shadowed a lot of doctors. So I kind of went down that route. But then detectives, I don't know any detectives, so I don't know where that came from.
Well, some things are allowed to just pop up out of nowhere, right?
Exactly.
How do your parents feel about Max the writer instead of Max the doctor?
It took them a little while, I think. They love it though, especially just now, like this past September. We went to go visit, and I revealed my pen name for the first time because they hadn't known. I was like, "You never read anything I'm writing. Don't even open a book." So I'm like, I don't want you reading these 4-letter words that I'm writing. But I did let them know my pen name, and they're super proud and happy. And I think they know that what needed to happen happened for sure.
That's good. And now they've got a son who's a best-selling author, because you've had that orange ribbon on Amazon.
Yeah, thank you. And they also are very proud of that too. Yeah.
You make your own covers. We don't hear that a lot. How did you take the leap to do what everybody says an author shouldn't do and make your own covers?
Yeah, I guess that it goes back to me spending so many hours in Photoshop. So I think a lot of authors are intimidated by Photoshop because it's scary. There's a lot of buttons going on. There's a lot of things that you can change and stuff. And even when I first started, my fiance, he's into photography, and he's a really great editor. And so he helped me kind of fine tune the colors and stuff in the very beginning. And then I kind of learned the tricks from there. So even when I first started, I still didn't know, everything there was to know about Photoshop. And I still don't know everything there is now. But I did really enjoy it. I like kind of putting them all together and picking the colors and the font and all that kind of stuff. And it's just a different aspect of book writing that I think it's really captured my attention. And thankfully I know how to do it. So it kind of works hand in hand. But yeah, it's definitely something that's come in handy for sure. And like I said, I can kind of control like the brand a little bit better. Like I won't feel bad about going to a designer and being like, oh, can you change this? Can you change this? Like I'll just change it myself.
Right.
So in that aspect, it's a little easier. But yeah, it is. It's another side to the job, that's for sure.
Have you done your covers since the beginning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's incredible. I'm a little jealous.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's definitely like I'll spend days looking through, like, I still haven't gotten specific like photo shoots done for my covers yet, so I'll spend a very long time looking through stock photos, and there are some very interesting stock photos that I'm like, why is this on here? But once that's another aspect to it, like picking a photographer and like all that kind of stuff that I will get into soon, probably my next series for sure. But yeah, I like making my covers.
Is that something your fiance could help with, since he is a photographer? Would he take potentially the photos for you?
I need to start cracking that whip, because yeah, for sure. I'm missing out on some stuff here. And yeah, he's such a great photographer. Like, it's crazy what he's doing. So yeah, hopefully you'll see an Armando Morales original on my next cover.
How did you decide as you were getting into the writing that gay romance was your space to be in?
I really connected with it. I don't know what happened. I think I just stumbled upon it, and I was like, wow, I really want to write this. And so like I said, I started off short stories, and then I did the Guardian series, which kind of like kicked it all off for me. And it was just these two men that were, bodyguards, and just trying to like, well, the first two men were FBI agents, but it just attracted me. Like, I loved the fact that I could also play with action and adventure, which was something that I was really am into. So if I could throw a car chase in there, if I could throw like a boat chase, like that, that works really well. And I am also a huge romantic. Like, I love romance, and I love like, Hallmark movies and rose petals everywhere and stuff like that. So it was really kind of like it clicked together really well.
Any particular author influences on what you're writing now?
I read a lot of different authors, a lot of different genres. Right now I'm reading The Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, which is an adult fantasy book that's gotten me like hooked. But like, I'll read like Adam Silvera's work, Stephen King. I was going through a bunch of his stuff, and I'm not like a huge fan of horror, but for some reason Stephen King like kind of like really snags me. So I read him, and a lot of people in our genre, like Riley Hart, Devin McCormick, N.R. Walker, Jacqueline Osborne. Like, there's so many like crazy good authors that it's just, you can't even choose like what's influencing you. Like, it's all like just a full well of goodness. And I think that's also important too. Like, if you're not reading widely, then I don't think you can learn as much. And I always want to be learning. Like, I always want to try to like make my next book better, or like try to figure out like how I can make it better. And I think by reading, and especially like reading actively, like just kind of like making sure you're paying attention to, oh, this is an interesting way that the author wrote the sentence, or oh, this is like a cool paragraph, or the flow of this is really cool. Like, I think picking up on those things really helps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I certainly find that to be the case too.
Mm-hmm.
Just to sort of break things down as you go. Sometimes I get too caught up in the plot to break them down, and I have to go back later.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
So what's coming up next for you? What do we have to look forward to, either as 2019 closes out or as 2020 comes in?
Next up is going to be my third Stonewall Miami book. Right now I'm thinking it's going to be called His First Surrender. And it's I mean, I wouldn't say it's wrapping up, but it's coming out to be a very interesting story. It's going to be a little bit edgier, I guess, than my last ones. There's a special room that our detective Rocky Hudson has in his house that people are going to be interested in. And also Rocky Hudson, the detective, he's kind of he's very closed off and like colder than a lot of my other characters, because I kind of try to veer more towards the warm side of the spectrum. So it's very interesting going into Rocky's headspace and like having that wall even higher than some of the other walls I've had in the past. So yeah, it looks like it's gonna be a good book. So stay tuned.
Very cool. And how can people keep up with you online so they'll know when that book is coming out and everything else on your plate?
Yeah, you can friend me on Facebook, Max Walker. Also have a Facebook group, and then on Instagram, Max Walker Writes. I'm really active on Instagram. You could it's just like a little photo album for me, so you can just check all the stuff out there. And Twitter, Max Walker Writes.
Very cool. We will link to all those things and the books we talked about in the show notes so that everybody can find them easily. It has been so awesome talking to you and getting some of the history on all these books, and look forward to reading what's next in the Stonewall series for sure.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was my first podcast interview ever, so I'm so happy it was here with you.